Hi, welcome back. Doing a follow-up video because I had some questions come in and some requests. So I wanted to address some topics that people saw the other videos and were curious about. And a recurring question that has come up a lot is the question of how to get started. Now, there's a couple ways to look at this, right? I have an idea. How do I get started taking my idea and turning it into something else, whether it's nonfiction or fiction or, short story, book, or what have you? There's also the little bit more literal sense of like, how should my work actually start? So I would look at that almost as like, what should I use as my opening scene or my opening chapter? And of course, we always want to have the opening chapter be like really groundbreaking and exciting. That's your first impression of your story. So you want people to be interested so they'll keep reading. You also don't want to give everything away in the opening scene. So that can be a bit of a balancing act. So, in terms of where to get started or how to get started, yeah, that can be overwhelming. When I've written nonfiction, it's usually easier for me to write an outline. As I'm starting out, that always has been kind of natural for me with nonfiction. With fiction, it's a whole other thing, though. And I've gotten more into the habit of outlining with fiction work recently, but that was not always the case. So I'll give examples of a few different ways to do it. If you have an idea and you're kind of short on time, it's not your typical writing time, and so you just want to like put something down somewhere so you don't lose the idea. There are mixed messages about whether you should carry around a little pad and just write down all your ideas. Stephen King, in his book on writing, is very critical of doing that. He said that's a good way to memorialize bad ideas, and he takes the stance that if it's a good idea worth keeping, you'll remember it. As somebody with memory issues, I take issue with that. I don't believe that's the case. I don't carry around a little notebook to write ideas down, though. Sometimes I will email them to myself if I have an idea that I don't want to forget and I can't just sit down and write something. But I also will open up a new document if I have a little bit more time, and if I'm sitting near my laptop, if an idea comes to me and I don't have time to write, I'll open up a blank document, write out a line or two about the idea, which, hint, hint, that could easily become your pitch depending on what your idea develops into. Save it, with a couple of keywords that I'll recognize it, and then come back to it later. My first novel that I wrote, Quiet Man, the idea came from having read a nonfiction book about the slaughter industry, and I was left thinking, there's a lot of crazy information in that people need to know, and how do you get that information to people in a way that they will keep reading if it's not, because it's a very specific topic. And if you're not an animal rights person, you're probably not going to pick up a book about working in a slaughterhouse and like read the whole thing. So I wanted to write this novel that became Quiet Man to give some more of that inside perspective, not from my experience, but from a lot of research into what people describe working in that industry. And so the idea was like, okay, well, how do I get people to read this? Well, let's start off with a person that is maybe relatable, who starts out as like a pretty, someone you can empathize with, like someone who's not like a monster or a villain, just like an average kind of person. In fact, maybe even like, not even average, maybe like exceptionally, quiet, laid back, wouldn't hurt a fly. And then let's have him do something really, really bad. And then the reader finds out that happened because of the trauma of working in the slaughter industry. And so that's where the idea came from. And at first it was, a page. And that was going to be the opening scene. And it changed many, many times. So that's the other thing. Sometimes you just need to start and, give yourself permission that wherever you start, you're going to be changing it, possibly. When people say like, oh, I just write the whole first draft and then I'm done, I'm very skeptical of that. I don't feel like you're not giving yourself a chance, or maybe I should say you're not doing yourself any favors if that's honestly what you're doing. So it also can kind of cramp your creativity, because if you're feeling like you need to have, this goes to the question of like, how do I start the book? How do I have the perfect first chapter? If you're waiting for the perfect first chapter, you may kind of freeze yourself with anxiety, like, oh my God, I'm stressed out because I can't figure out the perfect way into this story. Sometimes the way into the story may be a character sketch. Sometimes it might be a writing prompt. Sometimes it might just be an idea that you have and you're not sure where it's going to go. I think it's really fun when we let characters tell us how they want the story to unfold. So when we look at it in those ways, it takes a lot of the stress out of trying to figure out how to have everything all mapped up so that it will be like perfect before you even get started. So those are some ideas. I will talk a little bit more about structure and mapping and that kind of thing in another video. Thanks for watching.